Hello. Wow, what a crowd. This is crazy. I am so excited to be here. I'm Faber Jabulani. My pronouns are she and her. I have the honor and privilege of serving as the lead racial equity capacity catalyst of Forward through Ferguson and one of the organizers of the Racial Equity Summit Committee. So on behalf of the committee, again, welcome and thank you so much for being here with us. Today, I am moderating this justice panel. And regretfully, our co-moderator, Ms. Kenya, let me know early last evening that she has COVID, and so she's unable to make it here to co-moderate. But we worked on the questions together, and she's here with us in spirit. And so, shout out to Kenya. We're here, and we hope you feel better soon. So about the panel, in case you all haven't seen the description, I'll just briefly go over it with you about what we'll discuss today. 9 years after the 2014 uprising, the St. Louis region is still struggling to ensure safety, equity, justice for every resident, particularly Black residents and other impacted communities. Over the last several years, there have been highly reputable and effective organizations that have risen to answer the call to ensure justice through advocating explicitly for policies, structures, and investment in institutions that will dismantle structural anti-Black racism that persists in the local landscape. And so the purpose of this panel is to hear from a few of these prominent leaders, two of which you just saw the intro to their organization, Chosen for Change, and a few others. So the panelists will weigh in on questions specifically about justice, safety, and equity, and offer some perspective on pressing issues that all of us can take away and to support these issues through calls to action and investments right now and in the future. So I will call up the panel. Y'all can just come on up here and get comfortable. Let's welcome the panel. We talked about, okay, how do we want to walk up here? Is it just gonna be you first? Is it gonna be everybody? They thought it was extra for me to call everybody up singularly, so. Oh, do we need one more chair? I'll stand, it's fine. You sure, David? Okay, thank you. Yeah. What happened to my yellow chair? That's orange, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. So as you all saw, Chosen for Change is doing some incredible work, but I also want to bring people into this space before we talk. So Ms. Cal D. Brown is a wife, mother, community healer, change agent, and co-founder of the Michael Brown Sr. Chosen for Change organization. She is a passionate advocate for families across the world grieving the loss of a child to violence. A firm believer that community care can help parents cope, heal, and reinvent themselves after a tragic loss, she co-leads grief support circles, resource drives, advocacy campaigns, and youth mentoring programs. These initiatives strengthen heartbroken families and build safer environments for marginalized youth to live freely. So let's give a hand to Ms. Cal. Thank you. Additionally, we have our other co-founder here. Mr. Michael Brown Sr. is a husband, father, transformative public speaker, forgiveness coach, and co-founder of Chosen for Change. After the devastating murder of his son, Mike Brown Jr. in 2014, he embarked on a mission to provide care and support to families processing the unthinkable loss. Turning his pain into power, Michael has dedicated his life to transforming inner city communities through youth empowerment and strengthening mournful families through collective healing. Michael is especially committed to offering radical aid to ailing fathers because of their experiences of parental grief are often minimized and discounted by society. So towards this effort, he convenes the Chosen for Change Fathers Program to provide a compassionate gathering space for fathers who've lost their children to violence. Michael loves eating cows, cooking, working on cars, spending time with family and friends, and creating meaningful change in his village. Please give a hand to Michael Brown Sr. So I have some other folks here on the stage, my colleagues who I've worked with in different capacities over the last decade, who are also change makers, who I believe many of us came into our work through this moment. And so thank you for the work that you continue to do so that we can also be here. And I'll start with David. David Dwight, driven by passion for systems change and racial equity, David serves as the principal of DD4 Consulting, a strategy firm that supports social impact organizations to advance their visions for equity and justice and strengthen their operations. Particularly, he specializes in strategy development, group facilitation with all levels of stakeholders, community engagement, community decision-making process, and accelerating impact for equity and justice initiatives. David has a long bio, y'all. David, I'm gonna go a little bit shorter. David served as a founding staff member at Forward Through Ferguson. That is how we met and served Forward Through Ferguson pretty much from the commission all the way through recently when he completed his service and has started his own journey in his new organization. And so over these years in leadership, I think a total of 8 at FTF, David cemented the sustainability of the organization, grew the staff capacity, developed regional equity initiatives, and directed the organization's policy and system advocacy. David also serves in a variety of leadership roles. Particularly, he's a member of the St. Louis City Charter Commission, charged with updating the city's foundational governing rules and structures. David is certainly committed to supporting the St. Louis region and communities across the U.S. as we forge a path towards a transformed society where racial equity is the status quo. David balances his work through and maintains his sanity through the arts, particularly theater and dance. So let's welcome David Dwight, the fourth. Blake, who also has a long bio, is the executive director of Our City Defenders. Shout out to ACD, a nonprofit holistic legal advocacy organization in St. Louis that combats the criminalization of poverty and state violence. Blake is a native of the St. Louis region and joined Our City Defenders as a skating fellow and a staff attorney following his graduation from Harvard Law School in 2015. What I can say about Blake is that he is incredible and that he means business. And so I'm reading very quickly through his bio to find a spot where we can jump back in. As an executive director of ACD, Blake manages Arch City's growing talented staff, exploring new opportunities for advocacy and systemic litigation, communicates the work and the mission of ACD to students, supporters, fellow advocates, media, people all over the country as well as the region. Blake speaks on panels and writes awesome papers. So y'all should look at some of the things that Blake has written because he knows what he's talking about. I highly recommend it. Also, he and Kayla Reed, who was also invited to speak here today, but unfortunately could not attend, have an awesome podcast together called Under the Arch, which explores issues impacting communities in St. Louis and the people fighting to transform them. So let's welcome Blake Strode. And then last but not least, Mike Milton. Mike Milton is the founder and executive director of Freedom Community Center, a transformative justice hub in North City, St. Louis. FCC operates one of the first alternatives to incarceration and victim service processes for serious violence in the country. Mike is a transformative justice and somatic practitioner, who is awesome, an organizer and healer. Over the years, he spearheaded numerous successful organizing campaigns, closed Workhouse and many others, and building Black electoral power. In his organizing work, he built local and statewide coalitions, advocated for legislative change and pretrial justice toward abolition, and built and operated a local bail fund operation. So through his work, he has secured the release of more than 4,000 people in the St. Louis region. His focus lies at the intersection of promoting the practice of peacemaking, community organizing, violence interruption, and public policy, driving real transformative policy change that invests in poor and Black communities as a crucial focal point, rooted in an abolitionist future. He's dedicated to doing the work of tearing down the systems of oppression and actively building a world in which everyone, especially Black people, are free. Let's welcome Mike Milton. Okay, so I have four questions, okay? And I'm hoping that we get through all of them. So I'm gonna ask folks, as I ask them, we'll take a deep breath and make sure we share the mic, because it's a lot to think about, but I know we've had a little time to think about it. So just the first one, and I think Dr. Marty, thank you so much, Marty Casey did a great job of bringing us into the space. But tell us about how 2014 changed your life and your activism. And I think I would ask the three panelists on this side to begin to give Mike Sr. and Ms. Cal just some time to take that in, because I'm sure their answer will probably be a little different than ours. But please share, like, what brought you into your activism, and specifically, how did 2014 impact it for you? Blake, would you like to start?
Testing, yes. Hi, everyone. I need you all to know that light is very, very bright.
It is very.
It's like looking in the sun.
It is very bright.
I just want to say first, I'm very happy to be here, glad to be in a room full of people who care so deeply about racial equity, and especially honored to share this stage with Mike Sr. and Cal, whose courage and resilience and witness has inspired so many of us. So this is really a special occasion. For me, as you heard, I'm a St. Louis native. I'm one of those folks who went away for a while and came back. So when I graduated from high school in 2005, I ended up being gone for about 10 years. That ended, as you heard, with 3 years at Harvard Law School in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So on August 9th, 2014, I happened to be home in St. Louis. When I first heard the news, I didn't know any names yet, but had heard that there had been a police killing in Ferguson. And the next day, I returned. I was on my way back to law school, where I had my third and final year of law school. And so I share that to say that unlike some other folks, and you know, you hear from Mike and David, but other folks who experienced those following days and weeks and months here on the ground in St. Louis and in Ferguson, I had the experience not of being a frontliner in Ferguson, but of having my trajectory, my life trajectory, shift completely following those moments. I watched the uprising that happened here in my hometown, like much of the world, on television screens and reading the news and calling people back home, and having the very strange experience of having people not from here and who did not understand this place and who did not understand what Ferguson even really was, and we think it's related to St. Louis, but not really, trying to explain to people my hometown in a way that I never expected to do. I was certain before that time that I was bound for, I don't know, DC or somewhere on the coast. You go to some of these places, and the only opportunities you hear about are in big coastal cities. And if you say you want to do social justice or civil rights work, that's where you are directed. And for me, seeing the courage and the insistence of people here on the ground in St. Louis to speak truths to power, to put their bodies on the line, to raise their voices, it inspired me to come back home, and it made me understand that this place, that St. Louis, was in fact the front lines on the fight for social and racial justice. And so that was really the beginning of me looking for places where I could plug in, where I could try to use my skills as an attorney, as an advocate, to carry forth the work of really fighting for justice and of troubling our notions of what justice really is. So that's how it shifted my trajectory.
Thank you. Mike, David?
Yeah. What's up, y'all? How y'all doing? I said, what's up, y'all? You know, I come from the church. I like a good call and response. I'm going to say it one more time. What's up, y'all? Oh, I like that. I heard somebody say, hey. Again, thank you so much for the question. I really appreciate it. Before I answer that question, it's a very vital question. I also want to acknowledge that what was going on in 2014 for me doesn't even hold a flame to what I would imagine the rage, the anger, the pain, the loss of the family of Mike Brown. So thank you so much for all that you do for us in this movement. Thank you for activating me. Can we give him a round of applause, please? Thank y'all so much. Y'all changed my life. That moment changed my life. So in 2014, I was fresh out of seminary school. I was this young preacher at that time, doing a lot of stuff. And I'm formerly incarcerated, so I was maybe 3 or 4 years home at that time. But I had convinced the church to buy me a house in the hood so that we can have discipleship house. So every Friday, we had a basketball night. We invite guys from that neighborhood, and we would build a relationship. And if they need a house, then they would stay with us. And before you know it, there was maybe like 4 or 5 guys who were living with us in this discipleship house. And then every Friday morning, we would have circles, healing circles, where we would talk about life. A lot of these young men were learning new things at the same time and also formerly incarcerated, or they had active cases on probation and parole. So I remember specifically on the screen when Ferguson was happening, and we were watching it so we can have discussion. And I remember Andre at that time, who's now unfortunately is deceased. He said, "Mike, I'm going out there." I said, "Yo, you on probation, bro. You know what I'm saying? You can't be near police or gun. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't just go out there." And I saw in his face, teary-eyed, he said, "No, I gotta go." And everybody else in the group all agreed that they must go out to Ferguson. And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm going with you." So we go out there, and I see this massive force from the state. Tanks. There were so many tanks at that point, it was literally rumbling the ground under us. They were posted at the Wendy's down the street on West Florissant. As the night progressed, there was buses, and they would do fake things like, "I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to disperse it on count 5. They would release canisters into us. And at the same time, I saw this beauty of the men that I was working with who were doing amazing healing work, activated and powerful, and screaming to the top of their lungs, F12. It was beautiful. And in that moment, it clicked to me that yes, we can do healing circles. Yes, we can respond to, we can help these men get jobs. We can talk about misogyny and patriarchy in our communities. We can do those things. But they were activated, and that activation transformed them. Mary Hook says, she says, "It is the mandate for Black people to avenge our ancestors, to earn the respect of the future generations, and to be transformed in the service of the work." These men were being transformed. They were changing their trauma to power. And it was because they can relate to their communities being over-policed. They can relate to policing, putting guns on them and drugs on them that they didn't actually hold. They can relate to mothers and fathers being ripped out of their communities one by one. They said no more. And so what 2014 did for me, it transformed me. It transformed me because it made sense that even though we did these healing circles and these men, it was beautiful work, these men were giving me guns that were almost bigger than themselves and submitting it so they could submit to peace. It meant very little if the conditions are still the same that are creating violence in our communities. And so for us, it meant at that time that we have to do something about policy, public policy, in here. Public policy, war on drugs, 3 strikes, all of those things are political violence. And what they did was they created the material conditions for violence to grow within our communities, right? And so I want to charge, as I close on this question, I want to charge nonprofits in this room, including myself, that we can create all the programs in the world, but we have to do something about public policy. And so in 2014, I started setting my sights on mass incarceration specifically. I worked with Action St. Louis. I was one of the members of Action St. Louis. We did some amazing work. One of those campaigns was called Buy Bible. We unseated Bob McCullough, a 27-year incumbent, right? I mean, please. That's huge. Because this white man was putting all of us in jail, right? In addition to that, we continue to do work around bail and mass incarceration and pretrial detention. And I can talk more about that later.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's really an honor to be in space with you all, and really echoing what my friends up here have said. It's an incredible honor to be here with you all, and to continue to be witness in this moment to Mike Brown's life, you know, and the celebration of that, so I'm thankful. 2014 and the Uprising was the most catalyzing, transformative moment in my life that, for me, really brought together what were real threads of my experience, of my family's experience, of what I saw across my lives interacting with systems and organizations and corporations and power that started to mesh and make sense. Yesterday, Bethany and Rebecca talked about the seed of liberation being in all of us and that future existing today in that. For me, that period of the Uprising and the work that would come from the years after were the cultivation of that seed. And again, yes, catalyzed by this murder of a young black man, black boy, but also an incredible, beautiful celebration of life and how much life matters and how much black life matters. And for me, brought a sense of personal liberation and then in relation to other collective liberation. So I moved to St. Louis 12 years ago to go to school, to go to WashU studying engineering, which is not clearly what I'm doing right now. But it was my senior year when Michael Brown was killed. And I was coming back early to St. Louis, driving in the car with my father across the country from Philadelphia, my father who was born in 1954 and grew up as a child through the civil rights movement, who remembers segregated water fountains, who remembers all that experience. And I was coming back early to help with a orientation program for new students that were coming to St. Louis, right? How could they come into this place? And so we had this program through theater to teach. It was called Choices, right? What are the choices that we make? What is our individual agency as we come into a community and place? And how do those choices shape the outcomes? And so we were coming, I was one of the directors of that program, and that happened a couple days before. And so I came in that weekend, and protests were happening across the region, that uprising beginning, and at the Arch. And then on the first day of classes, we heard this call for people to stand up and to do a silent march. And so we got connected with students from SLU, and a group of us at WashU came together and said, we are going to do this. We're going to do a walkout on the first day of class. And we had hundreds of students across the 2 campuses marching. And from there, we knew we had to be part of the energy that was going on. And so we ended up forming a student organizing collaborative called St. Louis Students in Solidarity, which ended up having chapters at 7 or 8 different colleges and universities across the region. WashU, SLU, Harris-Stowe, Maryville, Fontbonne, Webster, UMSL, all engaged students saying we have to be a part of this, and we also recognize that our institutions, our universities, are part of perpetuating that systemic oppression in the region, and we have to do something about that, and both be witness and present for what was happening in the region, but also call on our universities to account and to do better. And so through that process got connected with the Ferguson Commission once I graduated, and that's history from there. But I think there's something sometimes in when we're going towards action and movement, which is like, don't let a tragedy go to waste is kind of, but that's like a pretty callous and like rigid way of looking at it. But I really think it was a movement of fierce, angry recognition of humanity and of love and an expression of that. And I am forever grateful and changed for being part of that movement.
Thank you. Ms. Cal, at the Chosen for Change Gala this year, I remember your speech, your address to the community, to people who were in the audience, and you said something along the lines of that Mike Jr. was like a vibrant person, and he said, one day the world is gonna know my name. And now we do. And so instead of the question, how did the 2014 change your life? I guess what I would ask you is, what did the moment mean for you now?
It means that I get to build a legacy that's befitting to Michael Brown Jr., who is very much so deserving of that. I believe we do a good job of showing that in the work that we do daily.
Thank you. Mike Sr., you can answer whichever the question you would like to answer. I kind of approached it with the rest of the panelists from the standpoint of the past, and asking the family and thinking about the present and acknowledging, as his father who shares the same name, what would you like to offer to the group, if anything? Thank you.
I would say since 2014,
You speak a little bit louder.
since 2014, for months I was in a daze, in November 24, 2014, when Bob McCullough denounced the non-indictment, that's definitely when the fire got sparked, I had to do some on my end. I knew I couldn't win on a negative part, so I had to play that game. And the game that was played was, I'm not gonna fall and do anything stupid that they're waiting on me to do. Like inciting riots, going out telling people what to do, and because I was up under the telescope, I didn't even know the feds was watching me for years, sitting back waiting, so with the foundation and the work that we do, it keeps me moving, it keeps it positive. It's all about the children, it's about families, it's about fathers, it's about mothers. We got Mothers of an Angel, we have Chosen Fathers. We have so many programs, so that it keeps me busy, and I do it in honor of him and trying to save the world. Well, our children. I wouldn't say a world, but our children, But that's where I'm at, They say, Mike, I know you be tired. I say, I sleep when it's over. We got work to do. I tell them all the time, they messed up and killed the wrong man's son. So I'm always be active, so.
Thank you. Miss Ebony, we may need a timekeeper, because we got a couple more questions. So if you need us to wrap up, somebody please come up here and wave a hand so I know when we need to wrap up. Thank you. Okay, let's get into the nitty gritty. So the purpose of this conference is Racial Equity Summit, right? And people have all kind of different definitions and impressions about what racial equity is or maybe what it could be. But I think across the board, something that we're all aligned on is that racial equity also has to mean justice for Black people, right? And so I guess in regards to justice and equity, the topic of the conversation, why is it important to address structural anti-Black racism specifically? And maybe if two folks, maybe 2 or 3 folks would like to weigh in on
Me and
that.
Blake arguing right now, like, you start. Y'all don't see this, but we talk all the time. Yeah, to your question, it's a beautiful question, and I'm gonna answer it. I come from a different school, y'all. I'm an organizer, right? So I don't play the racial equity game. But for me, what racial equity means is that if Black people are free, then all people are free. Black liberation is my core. And when I say Black people, I mean Black people in the hood, Black people that we typically throw away, that society typically throws away. I'm talking about drug-addicted Black women. I'm talking about Black queer people. All the intersectionality of Black people. If we are free, then everybody else will get free. Why? Because they created policies to specifically cage, oppress, suppress, and kill us, our bodies. That's the goal. And so for me, particularly, I'm gonna be real short, Black liberation. That's how we get to freedom. We deserve quality, long lives. Right now, North City life expectancy compared to West County life expectancy, they got us about 30 years. We're dying in our 30s. We're dying from high blood pressure, cholesterol, not having clean food or quality education. We're dying because they refuse to invest into our communities. And so, if we want to be equitable, we have to center those who are most oppressed, what Angela Davis calls triple oppressed for Black women, Black femme women, right? And so that's my answer.
Thank you. Chose for Change, would anybody like to respond to that one? Anti-Black racism, why should we deal with that first? David.
Yeah. I think dealing with anti-Black racism is so foundational and at a structural level because in this country of the U.S., it is one of our fundamental breaks with our humanity and the way that our state, our country, our nation was formed around a break with humanity and the recognition of humanity and the dignity of humanity. And when that is so foundational to a place that it's in the air we breathe, it's in every structure, it's in every place, it's from before the founding, it's from the genocide of Native Americans, it's in our Constitution, compromising on the dignity and worth of life and Black life, that it has to be foundational. If we don't take it at the root, we're never gonna get to a liberation.
Go ahead, Blake.
Can I add?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to speak to it at 2 levels. One is as someone who tries to be a student of history, which is really what I hear David speaking to, and then maybe wearing my lawyer hat for a second. But you cannot have an honest assessment of history without understanding the centrality of anti-Blackness in it, particularly in this country and in this region. We are the home of Dred Scott. We are the home of the East St. Louis race riots. We are the home of Shelby B. Kramer. We are the home of the Ferguson Uprising following the killing of 18-year-old Michael Brown. We have to wrestle with our history as a region, as a state, as a nation, and there's no way that you can have an honest assessment of that history and not understand something very particular about anti-Blackness. Anti-Blackness is a primary product of racial capitalism in the Western world. That's just a reality. And so we, of course, have to recognize that there are racial categories that are impacted differently. We should, of course, think about the displacement and genocide of indigenous peoples. We can, of course, understand the particular predicament of Asian communities that have faced exploitation and exclusion. We can understand xenophobia in the context of Latinx populations, on and on. And all of those things also tie back to anti-Blackness and the need to create social categories to maintain social hierarchy. So that's one point. The other that I would say briefly is, we've had this ongoing debate about CRT, right, critical race theory, which gets, becomes a stand-in for we don't want to talk about race. But what CRT actually is a theory and an area of study that understands that anti-Blackness and racism is embedded in our legal structures, embedded deeply in our legal structures, from the legal doctrine to the system itself of who actually gets to make decisions and who does not. And so if we actually think about, we're talking about policy, we're talking about systems of power, well, there is a reason that St. Louis looks the way it does. There is a reason that this country looks the way it does in terms of the relative position of Black folks and white folks in particular, but other racial groups as well. And so understanding that this is not just a matter of sentiment, it's not just a matter of interpersonal bias, it is very much a matter of what's baked into our legal and political structures in this country.
Thank you. And so then, what does justice mean? So I would invite the group to think about what's your definition of justice? And then how do we ensure accountability to that within the spheres of the justice system in the St. Louis context? We could talk about this for 2 hours. I know we do, but what does it mean? What does justice mean?
It's a great question. Again, I'm coming from the school of the church, and for us, justice means the wrong being made right again. And so from a political standpoint, what does it look like for the wrong to be made right again? Unequivocally, reparations, right? We need reparations. The 5 conditions of reparations are cessation, guaranteed of non-repetition, restitution, compensation, satisfaction, and rehabilitation. If we want to transform our world, we have to have a spirit of accountability. Like, you have to understand what you've done to our communities. You have to understand what you did to Black people. You have to work to repair it, right? Not put up 1,000 programs, but honestly repair what you have done. And that works on an individual level too. If I harm Marty Casey, right, and if I cause violence to Marty Casey, accountability looks like me acknowledging the consequences of my harm. It means that I'm transforming myself so I can stop doing that harm. It means that I'm willing to repair the harm designed by the survivor. So what does justice mean in this context, both on a political realm and also an individual realm? It means accountability and reparations. It means repair, right? And the second part of your question was? Okay, I got a little bit more to get off my chest, though. Hold on one second. So how do we ensure accountability with the system? Unequivocally, people power. People power. Right? We have a program at FCC called Court Watch, in which volunteers go into the courts 3 days a week to hold them accountable, hold the judges, prosecutors, and the defense attorneys accountable for how they set bail. And I can literally see the fear in their eyes when they see us walk into their courtroom. If we want to have if the way that we assure accountability in the justice system, they are afraid of us being a collective. They are afraid of us using our collective power and our collective identity with a shared understanding to fight against that. And that's how we achieve durable policy change in our communities. Past whatever they try to put up in our face. If we're collective, if we are acting as the beloved community, and we are pushing a policy agenda that works on the behalf of poor people in our communities, they can't fight against that. And so we hold them accountable by organizing, and specifically Black Power organizing.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else want to answer this question? What does justice mean?
Maybe
Yes.
quickly.
Go ahead, Michael, kick it off.
No, I wrote a little something, right? You gotta ask for key notes. But I thought about that question because you sent the questions, right? I haven't quite figured that out yet, right?
Yeah.
But because I was denied twice of justice,
Right.
right? So I created my own justice. I created my own justice, right? In the work that I do, you know. So working with these children and with these families, you know, it gives my heart some type of justice. You know what I'm saying? In the work that we do.
Thank you.
Y'all hear me?
Yeah. Hearing, I think people heard you, but just to sum up what you were saying, that you feel that there's also a need for us to create our own justice, and that you've created your own justice through Chosen for Change and the activism and the work that you do for your community.
Yeah.
So, I hear you.
Thank
Yes, go ahead, Blake.
I think that is beautiful and deeply important what you just said about creating your own definition of justice, because what I want to acknowledge is that there is something Orwellian and deeply pathological about how we talk about justice in this country. And if you're not careful, people will have you believing that justice is about punishing and caging and harming and perpetuating violence, that's what justice means. And it's really critical that we create our own definitions. And my favorite definition of justice comes from the philosopher and public intellectual, now independent presidential candidate Cornel West, who says, justice is what love looks like in public. And I try to hold on to that when I think about what we're trying to build in our work and with our partners.
Word. David?
Yeah, all three of these definitions of justice, I 100% agree with. And I think one of the things about humans, right, is like we're able to create, right? And from the beginning of humans, we created new technologies and things that allowed us to thrive with each other. Like, we're fundamentally relational and build communities and build societies. And so I think a lot of times we think about that creation and technology in terms of like tools and things, tools that could even be used towards that kind of punishment or towards violence. But I think one of the other fundamental powers of human beings is the technology of ideas and the recognition of that humanity and that love and that version of justice. And one of the most beautiful things of this movement in the tradition of past movements is to center that and hold people of power and institutions of power accountable to that justice, and in that people power to center that idea and that definition. And so I think justice is essential, especially at this Racial Equity Summit, because equity without justice, equity without accountability is toothless.
Period.
Like, it doesn't get to the roots. It doesn't fundamentally change that material well-being, get us to thriving. And so I think a lot of these things that we've beautifully built and are putting in practice and action and creating every day in the work, it's like justice is that reparation. It is that love and practice. It is that righting of wrong, of getting to the root. And to me, equity is about the administration of justice. Equity is about outcomes being thriving for everyone. Equity is about a process that lives into the principles of justice. And I think so often, nonprofits especially, we practice equity in that more toothless way. That's more of that kind of, you know, D&I kind of way of it that doesn't get to that reparations, that doesn't get to that that repair for individuals and their experiences of systems of oppression. And so I think that's what advocates for equity need to also be advocates for justice.
Yep.
And I do think that's something that our movements in St. Louis can benefit from, because I think we have incredible world-leading justice movements, like you were saying earlier, Blake. And I think sometimes we have not yet built the ability, knowledge, and in living of what administering justice actively looks like in our systems. And that's where a thing that I think St. Louis is working on right now.
Thank you. That's a great segue. So many things. And I have to remind myself that I'm the moderator, so. I'm the moderator. No. On that, Ms. Cal, what would St. Louis actually look like and feel like if justice was achieved, if justice was the reality? What would it look and feel like for you and for your family?
For me, justice is our children. If we love, nurture, and lead our children, they will be our justice. This generation of children, they're the chosen ones. They're chosen to change the world. And they'll be our justice eventually if we pour into them.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually kind of want to pass the mic to David again, because I know in your work you have thought about this a lot. The hashtag STL 2039 action plan, the whole purpose of it was to work with the community to try to imagine what that administering of equity would look like, right? And so now I know you completed your service to FTF, but are still in the work and through your new project and your own project and working towards that. And so I feel like I never actually really got a chance to ask you personally, like, what would St. Louis look and feel like if justice was achieved to David, right? Like, what's your vision for justice in St. Louis?
I 100% will answer that question, but something that you just said, Cal, just stuck with me so deeply. And it reminded me of the Sweet Honey on the Rocks song on children. And so can I just read a couple of those lyrics
for
to
it.
speak to what you were just saying? But it said, children, you may give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their soul, for their souls dwell in a place of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You can strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Your children are not just your children, they're the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. And that's really beautiful. So thank you so much for that. Thank you. And I still want a question. Answer the first question. I think justice in St. Louis, you can't get to it without a fundamental change in how power lies in the region. And I think that imbalance of power is felt every day in the lives of people of color across the region, on things that are from a white man expects me to move because I can't take up this space, to the far side of violence, of caging people and of killing black people and people of color. And so I think justice would be a right relationship with power. It would be away from the misuse of power, and power sitting in truly the hands of the people to both have personal self-determination for liberty and for liberation, but also community and collective. And maybe the one other thing is kind of connecting this question to talking about 2014 and how the uprising changed us. I think place has memory. And in so many ways, in all that history that you all have talked about, that Blake has talked about, that Mike has talked about, we have poisoned this place with acts of injustice.
Yep.
And I still remember and feel it every time I go by Arsenal in South Grand. after the protests, Ferguson, after Von Derek Myers was killed, and protests happened there, and we were tear gassed.
Right.
And in Mokabees, and then chased down the street, and at the church where people were taking refuge.
Yep.
And that is a reality of like memory that lives of injustice in St. Louis.
Yep.
And so I think a future with justice would also include a reparation and right relationship with this place, and the ability for everyone to create a sense of justice and a memory of justice in this place that doesn't erase that past, because we have to know it, but actively every day shows a different path and a different choice that we're making.
Thank you. It seems like we did it. Like we got one more question. And so I'll ask everybody, I think we have time for everybody to answer it. Right? But I'll start with Blake. What are the key justice issues that you think that any and every person here could focus on and show up to support? And so if there are structures and investments that need to be made to ensure justice, what are some of them that you think we should be pulling up for?
Sure, I'll just name a few that are near to my heart and that Arch City Defenders has been actively engaged in. So one, it's been named twice, but I just want to name it again, and maybe because I'm looking at a slide that has Delisha on it. But if you don't know, there is a reparations commission right now in the city of St. Louis. To me, we're not talking about that enough. There's not enough energy and participation in that process yet, not enough investment yet, and every single person in the city and to me in the region should be engaged in that. That is an opportunity for real transformative repair and to put our money where our mouths are. The word reparations immediately makes people very uncomfortable because it calls the question. And we have an opportunity not only to call the question, but to answer the question.
Period.
And if you live in St. Louis County, if you live in any other surrounding area, I encourage folks to advocate and organize and get reparations processes in those places too. This should be happening everywhere, in addition on the state level, in addition on the federal level. So one to me certainly is that reparations commission. I think it's about 8 months in now. There are several more to go. That's going to land in some recommendations, and then we're going to have work to do to actually make sure that we resource reparations in this region. The second that I want to name is our campaign, the Defund, Re-envision, Transform campaign, and I see some of my comrades from that campaign right here at this front table, and I've seen a couple others here today. So if you're not familiar, the DRT campaign is really aimed at shifting the allocation of resources in our region, moving them away from policing and caging people and into the kinds of support and care and love that we've been talking about on this panel. Budgets are moral documents. Our budgets tell us that we care much more about punishing people than we do caring for people. That's a choice, and we make that choice every day. And we have to be very attuned. You know, there's another one of those words. People hear defund, and they go, ooh, I thought we weren't allowed to say that.
Right.
Because you get that message from the president on down, right? This will lose elections. This is anti-this. This is, short-sighted. No, again, we have to ask the questions that really matter. Where are our dollars going? Where are our public resources going? And the DRT campaign is laser-focused on those questions. We have movement meetings every month. Everyone in here is invited. I would love to see this whole room at a DRT meeting. Everyone is invited. And so that's a critical effort that's happening right here in this region that is keeping our sights on how we can care for people instead of cage people. And then the third that I want to name, and DRT is sort of connected to this, is the People's Plan, which is a large coalition of 50-plus organizations in this region that have come together around both policy vision and an organizing strategy to actually build power for everyday people. It's rooted in principles of equity and justice and repair. And we have an opportunity as a people to actually push forward that vision. So if you don't know about the People's Plan, you can go to peoplesplanstl.org, figure out how to plug in, and we're going to be rolling out a kind of 2.0 in 2024.
Thank you.
Blake is a pastor, y'all. I don't think I see that. Can I give it up for Blake? That was a beautiful, beautiful work happening in the city. People's Plan, DRT, et cetera. One of the key issues that's dear to my heart is mass incarceration. As y'all probably would have guessed, I would have said that. And I can go on and on why mass incarceration is a mess. Just in short, it generates violence in our communities. It's based off principles that generates violence in our communities. I can go deep into that too. But also, mass incarceration has boomed. Literally from 1970 to now, there's been a 500% increase in the policing and the caging of black bodies, and they're dying in these facilities. And so that leads to my next part of that question. Right now, I wouldn't necessarily call it a campaign. My director of movement building and storytelling's right there. She'd probably be like, it's not a campaign. But there's a situation happening right now in St. Louis City where 10 people have died inside of the Justice Center. Let me say that again. 10 people have died mysteriously inside of the Justice Center. And this administration, along with others, have yet to provide answers or any type of insight of why those things are happening to people inside of that jail. And at one point, for a period between August and September, in a 40-day span, 3 people died. 3 people, right? And so there's a campaign, air quotes, no more jail deaths, where we're pulling up. We refuse to allow that facility to continue to kill our people. We refuse. The families are calling us. They're upset. They're upset. They're macing them for no reason. They're starving them out. Somebody told me that they was literally lost inside of the Justice Center for 3 days. They didn't even know he was there. Did not eat those 3 days, right? In our city. And so if I can say that what's a key issue that we should focus on, I would say incarceration generally. But right now, there's a huge issue when it comes to policing that's overfunded and underperforming, like always, right? There's the issues with our prosecutor's office where we're over-incarcerating people for things that can be solved in a regular conversation, like restorative justice. And there's a facility in which people are dying at alarming rates, mysteriously. And so there's ways that you can plug in. We also have the quote, which I talked about there earlier, where we're really getting on this pretrial detention thing, right? When I first started this work in 2018, only 4% of people were released on their own recognizance. That increased to maybe 60% at this point. So we're now at the point where we're fighting cash bail and we're actually winning to some degree. So there's so many different issues around incarceration that you can plug into.
Thank you.
+1 to all of those. And so I'll just touch on 2 really quickly. So it was mentioned earlier in my bio, but I'm on the Charter Commission for the city of St. Louis. This is the first time we've had the opportunity to change the most foundational governing body of our city, of St. Louis City. And this is the battleground and the structures that shape all of these fights for justice, right? When we're trying to pass policy, when we're trying to hold elected officials accountable, when we're trying to see that future realized. And unfortunately, the Charter Commission process so far has been not up to par with a real deep engagement of community in it, but please show up for it. Missouri was built on a compromise on Black life. The state literally was founded on that, and that has shaped the city of St. Louis's history, and we have a huge opportunity to shape our government to best achieve justice and equity in the region, so please get involved with that across the next year. And then just getting and supporting the Chosen for Change Foundation and organization and work. We're approaching the 10-year anniversary, decade, and we gotta show up.
That's one. What should people be doing and supporting right now? How can we support what's important to you?
I wanted to briefly talk about what Mike Milton said about the 10 individuals who mysteriously lost their life in jail. Not only that, just the other day, the 40th person overdosed in the jail. So that's a very important issue as well. Our people are being caged in and not properly cared for. There's many people who show up in those spaces but are not allowed to really give them the services that they need. So I think there needs to be a big push for that.
Thank you.
My original answer was mental and emotional health, grief support for youth and families. This is the first year Black youth suicide rates surpassed white youth suicide rates. Programs like Cookies and Convo, SWAT, Chosen Fathers. Systems affect generations to come. Lean into our programs. Thinking about the current generation and the generations to come, resources are still the same. Still the same lack of resources for teachers who are educating our students.
Thank you. Mike Senior, it's on you.
Oh, my God. Well, I was going to talk about that, right? She took it.
The children.
So I guess we just talk about our programs, right?
Key issues or things to support. It's
Yeah.
up to you.
So the organization is the Michael Brown Senior Chose for Change organization. We provide care and support to families that are processing the unthinkable, right? So we have the Mothers of an Angel, we have Chosen Fathers, and we have Sisters with a Task. So those are some of the programs that we are launching, or they are alive, and one is about to launch is Sisters with a Task. And we would like for everyone to check out this light so bright. I'm sorry I'm not looking at you all, but I would like for everyone to look at our website. It's thechosenforchange.org and follow us and just see the work that we've been doing since 2014 and what's up and what's coming up next. You know, we have we're gonna do Hood Santa. I do it every year to give back to the children. We're doing over 1,500 children this year. We did 300 last year, so we did a big boost. So we would like for everybody to come out and support that.
And stay tuned for the launch of All Roads Lead to Ferguson 2024.
All roads lead to Ferguson 2024. All right. I'm reminding myself that I'm the moderator. But what I will say, though, is
Do tell.
in addition to all the things that you all have shared, it seems that there's a growing discussion or discourse about young-ish. I say young-ish because we were young 10 years ago, but not as young now, but of Black leadership who are publicly identifying as abolitionists, right? Meaning that we are working towards dismantling and divesting in the systems that harm us and that take our lives, and reinvesting in innovating processes, structures, and making institutions that give us life and that restore our humanity. If you meet a Black person or any person who says that they're an abolitionist, have a conversation with them. And instead of asking, well, if we defund the police, what are we gonna do instead? You can check out some of the work that Forward Through Ferguson, as well as the People's Plan, FCC, and Action St. Louis are doing around civilian first responder alternatives. There are models that exist all over the country where public safety is the goal. Our public safety system should be a public safety system, and there are ways to utilize our resources to ensure that and to work with the community who have skill sets and knowledge in the areas that police are typically not trained to have skill sets in. And so highly encourage you all to be thinking about the issue of civilian first responder alternatives, because our region has the money to do it. We have the money to achieve the kind of society that we want to achieve. Thank you. The second thing, in addition to that, we have the money. St. Louis continues to be named one of the most philanthropic cities in the country. And what we know is that Black and people of color-led nonprofits are not getting funded what they need to get funded to sustain this generational work. And so as we are working on reparations, we should also be working on organizing philanthropy and challenging philanthropy. At these tables, you'll see some QR codes of names of organizations who are doing this generational change work. Please use your resources to support these organizations. You can donate, you can come to our events, you can mostly donate, and you can come to our events, right? And next year, there's gonna be a whole lot of eyes on St. Louis again. CNN will come back again. What y'all doing since 2014? Pull up and say that we never stopped working.
That's right.
Pull up and say that we've never stopped working. Racial justice organizations, specifically ones led by Black people and Indigenous people, get less than 2% of the philanthropy dollars that are donated every single year. And that can change with St. Louis. And so please act like y'all know us in public, not just at the Racial Equity Summit, right? And with that, I want to thank you all so much for listening to this panel. And I think I'm ready to pass the microphone back to the next people. So thank you so much to everybody here.